In the pits of Sauron, Beren and Felagund lay, and all their companions now were dead. But Sauron proposed to keep Felagund to the last, for he perceived that he was a Naldo of great might and wisdom, and he deemed that in him the secret of their errand lay. But when the wolf came for Beren, Felagund put forth all his power, burst his bonds, and he wrestled with the wolf and slew it with his hands and teeth. Yet he himself was wounded to the death. Then he spoke to Beren, saying, I go now to my long rest in the timeless halls beyond the seas and the mountains of Aman. It will be long ere I am seen among the Noldor again, and it may be that we shall not meet a second time in life or death, for the fates of our kindred are apart. Farewell. He died in the dark, in Tal in Goroth, whose great tower he himself had built. Thus King Finrod Felagund, fairest and most beloved of the house of Finwë, redeemed his oath, but Beren mourned beside him in despair.
Welcome back, guys.
All right, yeah, welcome to Keep on Tolkien.
Episode 9.
Episode 9, this is part 2 of part 2, because we're re-recording this episode.
That's right.
Due
to some technical difficulties.
We lost some audio, but it's going to be good, because it's going to be better than the last time we recorded it, right?
Right.
Right.
Practice makes perfect, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we thought we'd start off with an excerpt just kind of, touching on where we left off in part 1 with the death of Finrod Felagund.
Right.
Pretty dark place to leave everybody.
Yeah, sorry about that, by the way.
We thought it'd be a good place to kind of cut the stories.
Yeah, it flows really well that way, but it does leave you guys kind of sad.
Oh,
I hope you've all been sad for over a week, especially because this episode is going to be late. So you're sad for more than you had to be sad for, right?
Anyone who was actually keeping up with this real time is probably pretty pissed off.
They're super pissed.
But so that was a pretty terrible place that we're leaving Beren there in the pits of Sauron.
Naked, afraid,
with all of his men dead around him, including now Finrod Felagund.
Also dead, also naked.
Everyone's naked.
Everybody's naked, guys.
And the only one that's not dead is Beren.
Yep. But he's still naked.
But he is still naked. Meanwhile...
Yeah, for real, meanwhile, Lúthien's back in Doriath, right? And so she's basically on house arrest. They have her up in this, tree fort, and she's not able to go anywhere.
She could sense the anguish of Beren, and so she naturally sent to try to leave and go help him, but her dad obviously was not okay with that, so he posted her up in a treehouse, basically. So now you've got a Rapunzel situation going on. She's trapped in a tower.
And yeah, so she uses some more of her magic again. She uses spells to grow her hair, and she also weaves a magic cloak, which kind of it's literally a cloak in that it cloaks her beauty and her magic and whatnot. This is literally a cloak.
It makes her less perceptible to people. People don't really notice her. And it also, she put a special enchantment so that it cast a sleeping enchantment on people.
Right, yeah. People get sleepy when she comes around wearing that cloak. And yeah, so she uses enchantments to grow her hair long and escape, which is literally a Rapunzel situation.
Literally. But unfortunately, her escape was to no avail. She made it out of her treehouse, and as she's trying to leave Doriath, she happens across 2 new characters to the story who turn out to be probably the biggest assholes of all time.
Yeah, they're dicks. Have we mentioned them at all before?
I don't think we've mentioned them specifically.
So we're talking about Celegorm and Curufin. They're 2 of the sons of Feanor.
2 of the 7 sons. Now, Feanor, big character. kind of a dick. He had a bit of a
Kind of a dick, but I still like him. But you know I like all the dick characters
relatable.
because they're relatable. Because I'm a dick too, so like I like the dick characters, the real prideful ones.
I mean, Feanor was pretty crucial to a lot of the stuff that's happened. But
he started all this.
But as you'll remember, he made a oath about the Silmarils, and all of his 7 sons follow that oath, including these 2 jackasses.
Celegorm and Curufin.
And they come across Lúthien in the woods, and she's, still by herself trying to kind of get away to go find Beren. And she sees that they're Noldorian elves, unlike herself. She's Sindar. And so naturally she trusts them.
Why wouldn't you, right?
She assumes that they're friends of Beren. She happens to know that Beren and Finrod
are tight, yeah.
Are friends, and they went off to go do this together. Now, Celegorm and Curufin don't like Finrod Felagund.
No, in fact, they're trying to usurp his throne in Nargothrond.
Currently trying to usurp his throne. And they especially don't like that Beren is trying to go get one of their Silmarils.
Right.
So they, being sneaky little bastards, just say, oh yeah, we'll help you out, and then they kidnap Lúthien and take her back to Nargothrond.
And so at this point in the story, we get one of our favorite characters of all time is introduced. And that is, we've actually talked about him before, Huan, the Hound of Valinor.
He's a pretty badass singular character.
And Huan was gifted to Celegorm in Valinor by Orome, the hunter. And he's like he basically was raised by Orome. Like he was a pup of dogs raised by Orome. So he's pretty badass. And he's seen the light of the trees. So he's pretty badass. And so Huan, he can sense that Lúthien is she's not having a great time right now, and that she wants to, and he knows that that Celegorm and Curufin are not looking out for her best interest at this point.
No, he's a pure of heart kind of character, and he is sentient. In fact, he's not just a dog.
No, yeah, he's sentient. He'll speak.
He's the Hound of Valinor. Thank you, not the Mutt. So, sensing Lúthien's grief and captivity, and being pure of heart, he decides to help Lúthien. And for the first time in this story and in Huan's life, he speaks with words, and it's prophesied that he'll speak 3 times in his life. This is the very first. He speaks to Lúthien, and he tells her that he will help her. And then he kind of breaks her out, and they leave Nargothrond together.
Yeah, they ride, she rides him, literally, like a horse.
Like a steed.
Which could you imagine just seeing, like, the hottest girl you've ever seen just riding a huge fucking dog?
Just a giant hound.
Just a huge fucking dog. Like, that would be a sight to behold.
That'd be something else. Sounds like a Led Zeppelin song.
So they're on their way up to Tol Sirion, which is where we left Beren and Finrod. So as they get to the fortress, Lúthien stands out front, and she's basically drawing out Sauron's werewolves, and Huan just fucking kills them one by one. They come up, he snaps their necks, tears their throat out, whatever he does. Brutal, fucking brutal. Does it quick though. And he kills every single one of them except for Draugluin, right? Who's the last one. And so they have a pretty intense battle. And so Draugluin is actually mortally wounded, and he goes back into Sauron's dungeon after the fight, and he literally dies at Sauron's feet. And he says, the last thing he says before he dies is, Huan is here, and then dies at the foot of Sauron.
That's pretty terrifying. knowing that Huon's here working against you.
And so Sauron knows about this. There's a prophecy that Huon, the Hound of Valinor, will only be slain by the greatest wolf to ever live. And so he knows this. So Sauron automatically, because he's a prideful guy, he goes, you know who that wolf is? Fucking me. I'm that wolf. So he turns into what he believes to be the greatest wolf of all time, and he comes out to meet Huon, and then we start the battle of Huon and Wolf Sauron. Cue heavy metal guitars, Cody.
Oh, the battle's supposed to be just awful. The sounds and just it's I mean, you've got a Maiar fighting against the Hound of Valinor, which ultimately pins him to the ground by the neck.
Yeah. And he's in a real bad place now because he can't get up. Like, he's pinned down to the ground. He starts shape-shifting. He turns into like a serpent. He turns back into his fair form. He just keeps trying to get away, really.
But Sauron can't get away. Huon's got too tight a grasp on his neck.
And yeah, the only way for him to get out of this situation, essentially, would be to forsake his corporeal form and leave as a spirit, essentially. And that's basically what Lúthien comes up and says to him. She says, you're going to yield to me your tower, or I'm going to basically, I think it says something on the line of, I'll send your quaking ghost back to Morgoth or something like that.
Basically.
Yeah. So she's like, we'll send your naked spirit back to Angband to deal with Sauron,
and
to deal with Melkor.
That's the last person that you want to fail and let down is Melkor.
Oh yeah. So he basically, Sauron, not a dummy, sees that as a good deal. He's like, all right, I get to keep my skin, and they get the tower. So he turns into a giant bat and flies off into the night, and he's dripping blood from the throat as he leaves all over the place. But then, because he yields the mastery of the tower, what happens, Joel?
Well, he yields the spell holding the tower together that he wove around it to Lúthien. And then Lúthien uses that very same spell to basically take it all down. And she tears down the walls and releases the prisoners from inside Tol Sirion, and one of which being Beren. She finds him in Tol Sirion, naked, holding the body of dead, naked Finrod Felagund.
Also naked.
In case you didn't know.
In case you didn't know, everybody's naked except Lúthien, which is the one person everybody probably wants to be naked, but it's whatever.
It's okay. It's pretty badass.
Yeah, so she finds him. She originally thinks he's dead because he's he doesn't hear her approach. Because, like, all the prisoners, as soon as the walls came down, all the prisoners fucking got out of there. They're like, hey, we're free now, and they left. And Beren doesn't come out. He's still down in the pits.
He's mourning quite heavily.
Yeah, and she comes in, Lúthien comes in. He doesn't even hear her. And she touches him, and he finally wakes up from his despair or whatever, looks upon her, and, loves her. They love each other. Yeah. So, happily reunited, right? I mean, happiest under the circumstances, right? I mean, Finrod is dead. We can't get him back at this point. Finrod is dead.
Finrod's dead. They haven't achieved their goal, ultimately, why they left, but they're alive. Well, Beren's alive, and Lúthien's alive, and Huon's alive. And they call it a day at that point, and they start heading back south. Lúthien and Beren are going to head back to Doriath, and Huon ultimately was going to go back to his owners.
Yeah, he goes back to Caligorm. And at this point, Caligorm and Curufin are actually driven out of Nargothrond because the people hear about the death of Finrod, and they are fucking furious because they don't see it as an act of cowardice that the brothers didn't go with on the quest, which is because their whole oath is that they'll do whatever it takes, kill who's ever in their way to get these Silmarils, right?
Right, and yet they decided not to accompany Beren and Finrod on their quest. In fact, they tried to hinder them because they're dicks.
Because they're dicks. And, and so basically the people of Nargothrond they say, like, a maiden dared where the sons of Feanor would not. And they're pissed off. And so they
it basically becomes known that they tried to usurp the throne.
Yeah.
And it's not good. They get driven out.
And even the people who followed them who were part of their following in Nargothrond are like, nope, we're done. Including Celebrimbor, who's Curufin's own son.
Curufin's own son.
He says, no thank you, sir, and he fucking disowns his dad, and he's like, I'm going to stay here in Nargothrond and be the greatest smith of alive, and I'm just going to keep doing this, and and his dad fucks off and goes away. And that's probably the last time they ever see each other.
I hope so.
I hope so, too.
For Celebrimbor's sake. I hope that's the last time.
For Celebrimbor's sake.
So while on the road back to Doriath, Beren and Lúthien happen upon, once again, who else but Celegorm and Curufin on their way out of Nargothrond to go across Beleriand to meet up with the other sons of Feanor. They happen to run across these dicks once again.
Getting a little ahead here. So they're standing on the edge of Doriath, and they make the decision. He basically says, Beren says, I'm torn between, going back to Doriath and finishing my quest, which I have an oath to do. And Lúthien basically says, whatever you're going to do, I'm coming with you. Like, no matter what.
At this point, they've vowed to stay together after all the events at Tol Sirion. They're pretty shaken up after that.
And as they're deciding this is when Celegorm and Curufin show up. Worst timing. So they're like, all right, they decide, okay, we're going to do this journey. We're going to keep going. We're going to go to Angband, and we're going to get that shit. But then again, Celegorm and Curufin show up. And Curufin decides to, because he's a really good horseman, he swoops up Lúthien and throws her on the back of his horse. And at the same time, Celegorm is riding down Beren. He's going to run his ass over. But Beren makes a running leap and jumps onto the back of Curufin's horse and grabs him by the fucking throat. Because Beren is still naked at this point. Again, I mean, he's not naked. He's probably found some robe somewhere. But he has no gear. He's got no weapons. So he just starts to strangle this son of a bitch. Like, that's his plan, is like, I'm going to throttle this motherfucker until he dies.
And remember, Beren's a big guy. And they say that his leap was just renowned. It was a massive leap off the ground, up into the air, grabs this guy off the horse by his throat with one hand and throws him back down.
Choke slam.
It had to have been badass as hell.
Yeah, and they actually sing people sing about that leap. Like it's well known.
Seems like a weird thing to sing about.
Yeah, the leap of Beren. That'd be a great song. So yeah, and at this point, what happened?
They have a scuffle. Ultimately,
yeah, there's a scuffle.
And ultimately, Beren sends both the brothers off without their horses, and without their weapons, and without their clothes. But as one final...
Well, but he takes... what's he take, though?
He takes...
Very important.
Of the brothers' weapons that Beren takes, he takes something specific. It's a special dagger.
It's a special dagger. It's called Angrist. It's made by Telkar of Norgrad.
Famous dwarven smith.
He's made other things like the Dragon Helm of Dorloman, which we'll get into in our next series.
Next episode.
And what else he make? Oh, Narsil. He makes Narsil.
Narsil. He makes the Nauglamir. He makes a handful of things that I actually wasn't aware that he was the maker of. But
yeah, because we don't hear a whole lot about that dude. Just his name, pretty much.
No, you get to hear about the stuff he makes.
Yeah, but
and what happens to the stuff, but not really what happens to him.
Yeah. So that's really important. So they say that this knife, Angrist, it says it can cleave iron as if it were green wood.
So it's a pretty special dagger that he takes from them.
Like to the point where it doesn't even have a sheath; it just hangs.
Mm-hmm.
You just it chills naked, the blade.
But after taking this blade from them and their horses, and I'm pretty sure they're close, and I think they're naked now, and he sends them off. But as one final fuck you, one of the brothers turns around. I think it's Celegorm.
It's Curufin. He steals.
Is it Curufin?
He steals Celegorm's bow, and because he has no weapons at that point, because he's naked. Celegorm still has his shit.
Okay.
But Curufin is naked, and Beren takes this horse too, so he's horseless and naked, and he takes Celegorm's bow as they're riding off, assumingly on the same horse, like a bunch of bitches. But and then he turns around and he looses an arrow at Lúthien, and the first one Huan catches in his mouth.
This is the first time we see Huan act against his owners.
Right, yeah. Because, in the scuffle, he was trying to spear Beren, and Huan stepped in between him, and Celegorm cursed Huan. He was like, fuck you, basically.
Basically disowned the dog.
And, so the first arrow, Huan catches in his mouth, caught. Nothing happens. Second one, he looses another arrow, and Beren steps in front of it. Plunk, hits him right in the chest, and obviously that shit hurts, and it's not good for anybody.
So those two assholes ride off into the sunset together, back to their brothers, and they kind of leave.
Well, they don't ride off. Huan chases them off.
Okay, Huan chases them off. Yeah, at this point, Huan's done with them, and he's like, "You guys are assholes."
Yeah, he chases them off.
Straight up chases them off. So at this point, Huan never meets up with those guys again. He's hanging out with Beren and Lúthien from now on. Lúthien uses some of her elven magic to heal Beren and get him back into working order.
And also, Huan comes back with some herbs when he chases them off, and he comes back with some herbs in his mouth.
Naturally, because Huan's smart as hell.
Right, he's smart. Yeah, he probably learned from Yavanna, because that's where he's from, guys. He's fucking from Valinor. Like, this dog knows the Valar, bro. It's exciting.
So after this, especially after this most recent scuffle that he's had, Beren kind of decides on his own that he can't continue to risk Lúthien's life to complete this quest. So he decides on his own overnight to leave early before Huan and Lúthien wake to go off on his own.
Yeah, and he gets a little bit away, and he's like overcome with emotion. So like a lot of characters in this story, he starts singing, and which is kind of foolish of him, because it turns out Lúthien hears him singing. She sings back, and then comes and meets him, and she's
riding on Huan
once again.
And at this point, Huan speaks for the second time, and every time this hound speaks, it's just epic and important. And he basically counsels Beren to keep Lúthien with him because their fates are now entwined. And a way that they could continue on together that would keep them safe would be to disguise themselves. And Huan goes and gets the body of Draugluin from Tol Sirion. He was one of the werewolves that we were dealing with at Tol Sirion. Grabs his dead body, skins the wolf.
Yeah, skins that fucker.
Skins it, gives the wolf skins to Beren, and then also brings the body of a great bat.
Who is he's actually the she. It's a she. I just read it today. It's a she. I didn't know that.
Thoringwethel?
Thoringwethel is a she, and she was a vampire, and she was the herald of Sauron when he lived at Tol Sirion.
So basically, Sauron's top two folks. And
right,
he skins them both and gives their skins to Beren and Lúthien to wear as a disguise. And they actually wear these skins, and using the magic of Lúthien, they become the actual likeness of a werewolf in a great bat.
Yeah. To the point where, like,
it makes
even
them
orcs and shit looking at them wouldn't know.
It made them very uncomfortable.
Yeah, they weren't cool with it. So they eventually are able to, because their disguises are so good, they're able to just kind of stroll right into Angband.
Yeah, they go all the way up across the Aunfauglith, right up to the doors of Angband. And at this point, Huan has left them. They get to a point, and Huan says, "I can't go any further with you guys. You guys are on your own at this point." He's basically going to hang out on the outskirts and keep watch.
He's gonna watch their back.
Which Thank God he does. But so they approach Angband, the two of them, in disguise. Nobody knows who they are. And then they get to the doors and something insane happens. They run into an absolute monster called Karkaroth.
And the origins of Karkaroth is so basically Melkor / Morgoth has heard that Huan is now assisting like Beren and Lúthien. So he takes one of Draugalien's pups and feeds it living flesh.
The finest flesh.
The finest living flesh. The finest flesh. It sounds like a commercial for some shitty
of
project.
elf lords and just the finest flesh.
Flesh you can find. So yeah, he's feasting flesh, and he does a whole bunch of magic shit on him.
Yeah, doesn't he fill it with like demonic spirit as well?
Yeah, he puts some of his evil and malice, and obviously his Feya, into it, and makes it huge.
Yeah, he breeds this thing himself, and it is the only creature that comes near his throne in Angband. It's like his pet, and so he breeds this thing to be an absolute monster of a werewolf. And as they approach the doors, this wolf is pretty keen, and he senses something is up. So real quick, Lúthien, being wise, whips out her cloak that we talked about earlier and puts a sleep spell on Karkaroth and just puts that guy down at the door.
Just puts him out, just sleeping there on the
Out
bridge.
like a light.
Out like a light. And so they, with Karkaroth asleep, they kind of just stroll in there, and they descend down into the throne room, and there's a whole like evil court down there. There's like a whole bunch of, I'm sure Gothmog and some Balrogs are down there, and
this is also, mind you, the first time that we follow characters into Angband.
This is the first time in the Silmarillion.
Battles have been fought outside Angband. We know that Melkor lives there, and we know of some terrible shit that comes from there, but we've never had any of our main characters go into
the throne room.
Follow their story in there, and they described it as they walked down there to be just terrifying.
Just terrifying, dude.
There were statues that were supposed to be in the likeness of the children of Iluvatar, and yet mocking them physically, so they were just really morbid shit in this place.
Yeah.
And there were screams from all over, from people, thralls being tortured. It was basically like descending into hell.
Yeah, not fun. It's a not fun place. I just read it earlier, and it was disturbing. It seemed like a disturbing place.
It's not a place you want to be. Like, you thought that Mordor was pretty bad?
Oh, yeah. Angband. Angband's way worse than Mordor. Like, Mordor is cute compared to Angband.
It's Sauron's cute cabin.
Yeah,
summer
honestly.
home.
Just Sauron in general is cute compared to Morgoth. Like, people always, like, stack them up against each other. Like, yeah, cute.
No.
So they descend down into Angband, and Beren nestles himself under the throne of Morgoth, because he's still disguised as Draugr
As a wolf.
And Lúthien takes off her cloak, and she reveals herself, the only fucking character other than Fingolfin to ever fucking look Melkor in the face and be like, yeah, I'm this person, and I'm here standing before you, And so she says that. She says, like, I'm Lúthien of Doriath, and I'm here to sing for you. I'm here to be a
she tries to play, of all people, Morgoth. I guess I don't know how you'd think that was a good idea, but she reveals herself to him and tries to play him off as, yes, my father captured me and held me up in this tower, and I just don't want to be kept prisoner by him anymore, so I've come to basically help his enemies. And he's like, well, what could you possibly do to help me? And she's like, well,
I'll
even
sing a song.
great lords like yourself need song and dance and entertainment, right? And he basically laughs and says no.
yeah, he's like, no.
But go ahead.
There are no jesters down here, my friend. There are,
no. We feed giant wolves and things down here.
Yeah, there's no singing and dancing down here.
But he says go for it anyway, because at this point he's got all sorts of evil schemes running through his head.
Yeah, they said it was like the darkest thoughts he's had since he left Valinor. Whatever he was thinking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, while he's looking at you.
I mean, I can only imagine the terrible things he can think to do having Lúthien just standing in front of him. Not only in front of him, but in his home base. Like, what's she going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And so Lúthien sings one of her songs
And dances.
and does a dance, and she sings them all / dances them all, everybody to sleep.
It's supposed to be the most enchanting song and dance she was ever managed to put out. And they describe her dancing around the throne room, and all of the trolls and orcs and people start just falling to sleep. And she looks up at the throne, and Morgoth is still sitting there,
Just
staring. And he starts to see what's going on. She can tell he starts to get upset about it. But after a little while, there's a giant crash and a bang, and Morgoth falls off of his own throne, asleep on the floor, and the Iron Crown rolls across the throne room.
Rolls on the floor. Yeah, it's literally laying on the floor now. 3 Silmarils shining bright.
This is a very big deal.
Yeah.
Like, not as only nobody ever entered Angband before, but to just walk up to basically Satan himself and put him to sleep in his throne room. And then they continue to handle his crown. Oh, my God.
Yeah. And so Beren, I think he's kind of asleep too, because Lúthien has to rouse him. She touches him with her hand.
Yeah, she has to arouse him, and then he breaks out of his disguise as well. And what does he have with him but
pulls out that Angrist.
That dagger, that special dagger that he stole from the 2 asshole brothers. And he instantly goes to work on that Iron Crown, because that's where the Silmarils are. They're all 3 of them are in Morgoth's Iron Crown. So he takes it, and he actually gets the first Silmaril and pries it out.
Breaks the little teeth that hold it in. Bam.
Boom. And light fills the throne room. And then he's like, well, why stop here?
Yeah, he's like, at this point,
shit, let's do this now.
Let's do it. Let's take all these fucking things.
This is probably the best chance you're going to get, right? So he starts working on the second one, and sure as shit, that dagger breaks. And not only breaks, but it sends a shard of metal at Melkor's face and cuts his face.
Cuts him open.
And he stirs in his sleep.
And they're like, oh, okay, fuck all that shit. And it also says that everyone stirred in their sleep.
Oh.
So, yeah, because, so when that happened, you obviously get a shard of metal, flies across and hits the dude in the face, cuts him open. And then I'm sure it makes a noise as it hits the ground, too, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone stirs in their sleep, and Beren and Lúthien are like, all right, time to GTFO.
We've overstayed our welcome here. We got to get the hell out of hell.
Yeah. So they hightail it, and they run through the dungeons of Angband or whatever, and they get up to the bridge on the way out. And wouldn't you know it, Karkaroth is woken up.
He's still there. They just kind of left him sleeping.
Yeah.
And he's awake, and, they're obviously not in disguise anymore. And Karkaroth is, wise to what they're doing now, and he is furious and not happy.
Not happy.
And at this point, they don't have any weapons. Beren broke that dagger. So he does the only thing he knows he could think to do. He stands in front of Lúthien, and he holds up the light of the Silmaril, hoping to repel evil with it, right?
Yeah. And the thing too we didn't mention is that it's very important that when Beren touches the Silmaril, it doesn't hurt him. And that's very, very important, because in all evil characters who ever come in contact with the Silmaril, it burns them.
Yeah, if you are evil or you've done evil deeds, if you're
evil shit,
generally an evil person, the light of the Silmarils is like pure goodness. It will burn you. You can't touch it.
Yeah, which is why Melkor's hands are always black, because he stole them in the first place.
Yeah, he burned his hands trying to take them.
Yeah, and in artist renderings, you'll always see his hands are burnt. His hands are burned on the inside.
That's why he's called, Morgoth Bauglir, right?
Bauglir, doesn't that mean like black hands?
Black hands,
yeah.
Yep. And so Beren tries to defend off the evil with this light, and basically this massive werewolf looks at him with this rock and just chomps his hand off.
Chomp.
It's just gone. He just bites the Silmaril, his hand, and everything whole and swallows it. And so Beren's just on the ground, obviously not doing well.
No.
That's pretty fucked up, and I'm pretty sure... Wasn't the wolf poisonous too?
Yeah, it poisoned. So Lúthien has to suck out the poison.
But at this point,
oh, so sensual.
At this point, you got to think that now the ultimate goodness is inside the stomach of a terrible, evil werewolf, and instantly it sends this wolf into an absolute mad just rage.
Just rage.
He is just not even perceiving what it is that's around him. He's literally killing everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's killing
Doesn't
orcs.
matter
He's
who
killing
it is,
wild animals. He's killing. He'll kill
everybody.
anyone, and he just goes on a rage and just runs off south, just howling and killing and destroying things.
Yeah, and then while this shit is going on, everybody in Angband is waking up, and Morgoth is not happy.
I mean, Beren and Lúthien are screwed at this point.
Yeah, they're screwed.
They're sitting at the doorstep with Beren basically going unconscious, missing a hand, no weapons. I mean, they're done for.
Everybody's waking up. Yeah, everybody's waking up. Karkaroth is crazy. They don't even have the goddamn Silmaril, which was what they came for.
Right, they got it and then they lost it.
Yeah. And so at this point, shit starts going down. Like, Morgoth is mad, like lightning and shit is like, there's rumbling and screaming, and he's not happy.
Yeah. Just in time, though, who
always shows up just in time? Who in Tolkien always shows up
at the last minute?
At the last minute.
The Eagles.
The Eagles, man.
The Eagles are coming.
Thorondor and his Eagles come on and pick him up.
Yeah, and so the Eagles pick up Beren and Lúthien, and there's a part in the Silmarillion where it describes Lúthien looking down on Angband as everyone's like waking up, and Melkor is furious, and yeah, like you said, it was thunder, lightning leaping from Angband. There was fire and smoke belching out of the peaks of Thangorodrim, and bolts of fire hurled across Beleriand and was just destroying it. Like, he's obviously pretty fucking furious.
Not happy.
No.
Imagine if they would have took all of them.
I feel like they wouldn't have been able to. Like, I feel like Melkor himself probably would have done something at that. I feel like that would have been too much. He would have absolutely gone shit crazy, and I don't even know.
You know what I always found kind of weird is why didn't they just take the crown?
Yeah, that's actually
I bet it's super heavy. I bet it's real heavy. That's probably why.
I mean, Melkor's supposed to be a pretty big guy.
Yeah, he's huge.
And it's made of, I assume, iron or cast iron.
It's iron. So, okay, we're going to say here and now that the crown is too heavy to carry, all right? So
it's like carrying a cast iron bathtub out.
Exactly. Yeah, those old cast iron bathtubs. Yeah.
That's how we're going to explain that away.
Yeah. I shoved one of those down a staircase one time.
That sounds like a bad idea.
Oh, well, I had to. It was me and my grandpa were taking the tub out of my grandma's house. It was like an old claw tub.
Did it like break the stairs?
No, it made a hell of a noise though. Hell of a noise. We slid it down the back stairs. It was like boom, 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 boom.
Imagine that crown falling down and rolling across the floor.
Well, it'd make a hell of a noise.
Right.
Hell of a noise.
But Beren and Lúthien.
Yeah, back to Beren and Lúthien. So the Eagles pick him up, and one of the cool things about when the Eagles pick him up is Lúthien actually looks down and she sees Gondolin from the air.
Yeah, because the Eagles start flying him back south from Angband to get to Doriath, and while they're flying south, they happen to fly over Gondolin,
and she sees like green and white down there, because that's what Gondolin's all about. Is that green and white? Yeah,
so that's like a fun little Easter egg for her. Like,
yeah, a little Easter egg.
No one knows where Gondolin is. She doesn't know where Gondolin is. The only people that have ever been there are Huor and Húrin, but they don't even know technically where
well,
it is.
And also that hasn't happened yet.
Has it not?
No.
I wonder how those timelines line up.
Actually, it might be around the same time. Maybe Húrin and Huor are there while she flies.
It could be because they were there for what, like a year or a couple of years?
They stayed there a year. Okay. These are two characters we're going to talk about more in the next set.
Yeah, the very next episode. So stay tuned, guys. But so she gets that fun little vision of Gondolin as the Eagles fly her back to Doriath with Beren and sets them down safely within the confines of Doriath. But they're not doing so well. She sucked the poison out of Beren. He's still pretty injured. And not only that, but Doriath has changed. They've been gone a while.
Mm-hmm. And it's cold and shit. Like, it's wintertime.
It's dark. People are not happy anymore. If you'll remember before, people in Doriath basically lived in blissful peace away from all the shit that was happening with Melkor and the Noldor and all that stuff.
Yeah, they had their girdle of Melian.
They had the girdle of Melian, but after Lúthien left, things changed. There was nobody to sing away winter and bring about spring, and naturally Thingol was very sad. And when the king's sad, everyone's sad, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's how autocracy works. Yeah. So they come back into Doriath and into Menegroth.
Yeah, they go all the way back to Thingol himself in the kingdom of Menegroth.
And there's a really cool scene where Beren comes in and he's like, "I'm here to claim my own. My quest is fulfilled." And they're like,
What?
"What?" And he says, "Even now, I clutch a Silmaril in my hand." And then he holds out his left hand,
Which is just there, and
Which
it's
is-
bare.
which is empty. And at this point, so people like to give themselves names in Tolkien. Beren calls himself Camlost after this, which means empty-handed. And then he also, when he got his hand bit off, people from then on called him Urkamian, which means one-handed.
Mhm.
So he's got a couple names here. Anyway, he holds out his hand. It's empty. And then he holds up his stump. And Thingol immediately understands.
He's like, oh shit, something major has happened here.
And it softens him a little bit.
Yeah, they at that point, Lúthien and Beren tell Thingol the whole story, everything that's
thing.
happened, the death of Finrod, everything that happened in Angband. Hell, they got to Angband, and they even got a hold of his crown. They got a Silmaril, but to no avail, ultimately. And it softened Thingol quite a bit, to the point where he gained a lot of respect for Beren.
Yeah,
And
he's like, you're unlike any other mortal. Like, you've done things, and then he actually gives him Lúthien's hand at that point.
Yeah.
They get married. Just right
if
then
that
and there.
shows you like how much his opinion has changed on Beren, he gives them his blessing gladly, because Beren is one badass dude.
Mm-hmm. He deserves it.
So amongst all the grief and bad things that were going on, there was a little bit of joy and a little in the marriage of
For a
Beren
minute,
and Lúthien.
yeah,
For a minute. But ultimately then they started getting reports in from the northern borders of Doriath that there's this monstrous wolf that's just been ravaging the countryside, killing people and destroying
Just
things. 'Cause,
destroying everything.
I mean, Karkaroth is still running around raging with that Silmaril in his stomach.
Burning inside of his stomach.
Like, they talk about how he would go to rivers and just start drinking rivers and
Mhm.
poisoning the rivers, trying to sate the burning that he has in his stomach with the Silmaril, and nothing works, and he's just going mad.
And so at this point, you know how there's always that point, and especially in Tolkien does this too. And we talked about Game of Thrones did this in their last season, is when you get like the most badass characters of all time together to like do something together.
Oh, yeah.
So they form a posse.
A badass posse.
A badass posse. And it's got Beren.
Naturally.
It's got Mablung, the heavy-handed, who's the King's Guard. And it's got Beleg Strongbow, who we will get more into Beleg.
Yeah, so
He's-
Mablung and Beleg, they reside in Doriath. They're King Thingol's friends.
Yeah, friends / his best warriors.
Yeah, they're hella warriors.
Yeah. So they
And
gear
then
up.
Thingol
and then
himself.
Thingol himself gears up.
And we're still forgetting one of the most badass characters part of this posse, Huan.
the Hound of
Huan, the
Valinor.
Hound of Valinor.
And so they set out and they come across them, Karkaroth being, and he's drinking the waters of Asgalduin, the river, trying to quench the burning in his stomach. And so Huan decides to they're basically overlooking him, and then Huan sneaks off, and he's trying to assault him,
Like, flank him.
or something. Yeah, he's trying to flank him. Essentially.
Basically.
Yeah, Huan's like, I'm gonna flank him, and he takes
But
off.
before Huan has a chance to do that, Karkaroth notices that their group is there.
Mm-hmm.
And so Huan is now off trying to do something, and this motherfucker just attacks. He
goes straight for Thingol.
He goes straight
too.
for Thingol. He bounds across the river through the trees and just right on Thingol. Like, this is obviously a problem. This motherfucker is huge, and he's
Mhm.
killing everyone. Like, he's going to kill this guy.
And so in another show of Beren's worth and dedication, he saves Thingol's life. He takes a spear,
Single-handed, mind you, he has one hand now.
literally single-handed. Yeah, literally single-handed. I didn't even think of that, Joel.
Yeah, he's one-handed
I didn't
now.
even think of that. Yeah, he only has one fucking hand right now. Wow, I never thought it. Like, this part of the story is so much more badass now. I totally forgot. Dude only got one hand at this point. So yeah, he takes up his good hand, which is his left hand. It's not even his sword hand.
Takes a spear and he tries to go right for Karkaroth, which is pretty badass, but it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. He's
Karkaroth
swept aside.
Swept aside, like, easily. Like, this guy's a monster. Just throws Beren
ragdoll.
aside, and then while Beren is on the ground, he's just on Beren, ripping apart his chest.
Just tearing pieces of his chest out.
Just gnawing at his chest, they say. And, I mean, things are pretty bleak at this point. I mean, Thingol's down, and this has all happened so fast, and now Beren's getting just torn apart, and then out of nowhere comes Huan, the Hound, and he just jumps on top of his back and brings him down to the ground, and their battle is supposed to be... I mean, you thought the battle between Huan and Wolf Sauron was badass. This is supposed to be horrifying. There was a...
Should read this excerpt. This is a really cool excerpt.
So there's an excerpt from the Silmarillion that we wanted to throw in there about their battle, and it goes... In the baying of Huan was heard the horns of Orome and the wrath of the Valar. But in the howls of Karkaroth was the hate of Morgoth and the malice crueler than teeth of steel.
Hell yeah.
So it's basically symbolic between these two wolves. The fight between them is symbolic of the
it's
ultimate
a proxy fight. Yeah.
it's the ultimate fight between Melkor and the Valar coming out right in front of these elves and this one man. And it's the sounds were horrible. They said that their fighting was downing trees and breaking rocks, and it was something.
Yeah. And so eventually Karkaroth is killed, and he's but at the same time, our good dear friend Huan,
the faithful hound,
is mortally wounded, and he goes over to Beren, who's still barely alive, bleeding out from his chest wounds, and he speaks to him for the third and final time, and he bids farewell, and he dies.
A moment of silence for Huan.
Pour one out.
So Huan dies there next to Beren, and they get Beren and Huan's body, and they put them together on a
Stretcher.
And they carry them back to Doriath, where Beren sees Lúthien one more time before he too passes up the ghost.
And she pleads with him before he dies, and she says, "Wait for me in the shores beyond the sea." And then
right before he dies, though, they cut the Silmaril.
Oh, that's right. This is a very powerful moment.
They actually cut open Karkaroth's dead carcass. They cut open his belly, and they pull this shining light from his carcass,
which still is attached to
Beren's hand.
Beren's hand is still attached, uncorrupt.
His hand was perfectly preserved, holding onto the Silmaril in this wolf's stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And they hand the Silmaril to Beren in his good hand. And before he dies, Beren hands the Silmaril to Thingol.
And he says something on the lines of, "Oath fulfilled, bruh."
Basically. And then that was Beren's death.
And then he dies. Moment of silence.
Another moment of silence.
Yeah. So, and like I said, Lúthien, she pleads with Beren to wait for her, which I don't really know what that means.
How can you do that?
Right. Yeah. So,
but
and then so Lúthien ultimately
is grieving so hard that she essentially dies as well.
She dies.
She gives up her spirit out of grief.
Yeah, which elves do. They die of grief, which is something that's people kind of do that too. And people kind of do that in real life.
People do that when people are sick in the hospital. If they don't have the will to live, they will just start to die.
Yeah. Or like people, like when people have been married a really long time, like you've been married for 60 years or something like that, and your wife dies, like you die within a year. Like you're
right.
Done. Like Anyway,
so it was traumatic for her. She basically died of grief, and being an elf, her soul goes to the halls of Mandos.
Right.
Mandos, the Valar, who is essentially like I'm trying to think of a good comparison for him.
He's kind of like Hermes in that he ushers the dead spirits into the after. Like if you could compare him to like a Greek god, it would be like Hermes.
Yeah, and she pleads to him,
and because here's another thing: Beren, being the persistent little fuck that he is, his spirit is refusing to leave. And it's tarrying in the halls of Mandos because the spirits of men don't go there.
No, they're supposed to go beyond.
Yeah, we don't know where they go. And
that's the gift of men.
Yeah, the gift of
death of men, the gift of Iluvatar to men when they die. They go beyond the halls of Mandos to nobody knows where or how or if they come back. It's a mystery.
But Beren, stubborn little shit, he's for some reason stuck in the halls
tarrying
of Mandos.
Around in the halls of Mandos, and Lúthien goes there and goes to Mandos himself and sings a song that's supposed to be just the most sorrowful song describing the griefs of both elves and men, just mourning. And it moves Mandos.
It moves, everybody who hears it, And so Mandos is basically at this point, he gives Lúthien a choice, a great choice. And he says, you can either stay here in Valinor and mourn the death of Beren for all eternity.
Yeah, basically grieve in this wonderful place. It'll help.
Yeah, it'll be like it's the best place to grieve. Let's be honest. Like,
yeah, I mean specifically the Gardens of Lórien is where he was offering her, and that's where people go. That's where Melian went when she grieves at one point in the future. Anyway,
and so that's choice one, choice A. Choice B is choice B is to go back to Middle Earth and live with Beren. He's essentially given him another chance, but she will give up her immortality and her spirit will no longer be tethered to the earth as elves are. So basically, what he's saying is, when you die again, because you will die a mortal death now, your spirit doesn't get to come back here. So this is the last of Valinor you're ever going to see, basically, is what he says. And what do you think Lúthien does, Joel?
Well, being the romantic that she is, she obviously chooses to live again with her lover Beren, both mortal, in Beleriand. And Mandos grants her wish, and I think it's on behalf of Manwë, right?
Yeah, Manwë's obviously he has the say.
He has the ultimate say, but Mandos goes to Manwë and they work it out, and they are again alive in Beleriand.
Yay!
Woo! Happy ending, right? And they're both mortal.
And they're both mortal now.
I guess that's not happy, but that's they're on the same level, right?
Right. I mean, and this is like we said in the beginning of this series that we're doing here. This is a story of love and how love conquers. This is Tolkien's great love story.
This is his great love story, yeah.
And it's how love conquers everything. Evil, fear, death itself, all are conquered by love. And that's what this story says. And it's kind of a unique story in Tolkien for that. And it's super sad. So when Tolkien's wife died, he actually had Lúthien inscribed on her gravestone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a really sad letter in the new Beren and Lúthien book where he talks about
Christopher. I think Christopher describes J.R.R. Tolkien saying this.
Right, yeah. He talks about how his father basically lamented that he couldn't go to the halls of Mandos and plead for Lúthien to come back as she did for Beren because she's dead. Anyway,
super sad
shit. You should definitely read the Beren and Lúthien book. We didn't really talk a whole lot about the Beren and Lúthien book, but we probably will in the future.
Yeah, this episode consists of the ultimate final canon version of Beren and Lúthien, but Beren and Lúthien specifically is a story that has at least 3 fleshed out versions, because this story was created before Middle Earth was even a thing. This was like one of Tolkien's earliest fairy tales.
Yeah, we're talking like 1917 here. Like
Christopher Tolkien says he remembers his father telling the story to him as a kid at bedtime.
So yeah, very old story.
So that's essentially the end of the Quenta story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
of Beren and Lúthien.
So Beren and Lúthien, they live happily ever after in Assyrian, the land of seven rivers.
yeah, it's just east of Doriath a ways, and it's
And
basically
they,
wonderful plains with rivers and green
and they have a son too, whose name is Dior.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll learn a lot more about Dior later on because being Thingol's heir, he is.
Right. So whereas generally that's the end of the story of Beren and Lúthien, we wanted to at least let you know what happens to those characters in the long term. So after they get settled down at the island that they're living on over in Osirian, you know, a nice happy place, and they have a child named Dior. Things are going pretty well, but you got to remember, back in Doriath, still, Thingol now has his Silmaril.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big game changer.
Yeah, it's game changer.
Now, this whole time with Beren and Lúthien doing their coming back from the dead and living happily ever after and having a kid stuff, the whole time Thingol is still there in Menegroth with this Silmaril, and his mind is just bent on it constantly, to the point where he doesn't even trust it to be guarded behind doors in his sacred treasury anymore. He can't stand to be parted with it. He wants
he becomes
to guard.
obsessed with
He
it,
becomes
yeah.
obsessed with it, and I think this is kind of where they pull the whole bit with the rings of power.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
Because me and Joel actually had a conversation because me and Joel are in this weird. So basically, the Lord of the Rings is kind of like the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit were this shit that sold.
yeah. It
basically,
was
is
the
what we're
stuff
talking.
that he had to come up with to sell. He wanted to
sell
sell
books.
the Silmarillion and all this first age stuff. J.R.R. Tolkien did,
And they
but
were like, "No, that shit is lame. We want to hear about hobbits."
so he took a lot of the same concepts and basically just rehashed them up in the Lord of the Rings.
'Cause, yeah, we were talking about how a lot of the things in the Third Age are just kind of a hearkening back to the First Age stuff, and
plot twists.
and one of those is the lust for the ring
Mhm.
and how people lust for objects like the Silmarils.
like the Silmarils. So Thingol gets this lust, and so at this time, throughout the history of the kingdom of Doriath, of the Sindarin elves, they're not the most amazing smiths. So a little bit to the east, actually just east of Osirian, where Beren and Lúthien now are, there's the Blue Mountain Range, and
Yeah.
in the Blue Mountains there's
Who
two...
lives there, Joel? Who lives in the Blue Mountains?
Oh, let me tell you.
Joel's gonna tell us who lives in the Blue Mountains.
You know who lives in the Blue Mountains, guys? The fucking dwarves live in
Yeah.
the Blue Mountains. There's two dwarven strongholds called Nargrad, right?
Yeah.
Nargrad and Belagost.
Mm-hmm.
And that famous dwarven smith that we mentioned earlier in this episode,
Telkar.
Telkar, he is one of the smiths from Nargrad, and the dwarven smiths from Nargrad travel to Doriath to help the elves out with some of their smithing needs.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, you know, Thingol has this Silmaril, and he doesn't even want to part with it anymore. So he gets this great idea when he sees some of the dwarves traveling into Doriath and to Menegroth, and he tracks them down and requests their help to have them use their smithing skills to instill the Silmaril into a special dwarven necklace called the Nauglamir, which is supposed to be one of the greatest
Works of art.
works of the dwarves.
Yeah.
Ever.
Period. And he wants to set the greatest work of the elves. Period. Into the greatest work of the dwarves. Period.
And so he gets them to do it. He gets this famous smith and a couple of his other dwarf friends to work in Menegroth for a while, and they set this together. And then it is now this necklace with a Silmaril in it is the greatest work amongst dwarves and
Ever
elves.
made by craft. Yeah.
And, I mean, men, they don't even get
Nowhere
considered
near,
in this
yeah.
category.
As much as men.
As valiant as men are, their smithing skills are not quite on par with
No.
the other. With
I
the
mean,
other
they're
ones.
good, but like
Yeah.
Numenor had some shit going on. They were good, but like other than that, not so much.
Right. But so they make this, and it is truly great. This new necklace with the Silmaril in it, to the point where now the dwarves lust after it. And
Oh yeah, they're
when it's finally finished, they withhold it from Thingol, and they ask him what right Thingol has to this item, this dwarven necklace, which was originally gifted to someone else, but it came to be in the hands of Thingol. And
which is a whole other story.
that's a whole. We'll actually get to that.
We're getting
next
that.
episode.
Yeah, we're getting into that too.
All these things that we said we'll get to in the future, they're coming.
They're coming up.
They're actually happening. But they withhold it, and Thingol gets furious, and he insults them and tells them that they are cast out from Doriath, and he belittles them, and
He mocks them.
he mocks them, and they are enraged, and they kill him.
They fucking slay Thingol,
The king of
the
Doriath.
king of Doriath, in Doriath, surrounded by fucking elves.
And may we mention again that this is the most established kingdom in all of Middle-earth at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Doriath has been around since...
It's the oldest, yeah.
It's one of the oldest since before the Noldor even came back to Middle-earth. So this is a big deal. He killed like a high king of the Sindar.
Mm-hmm.
These dwarves did. So they book it out of Doriath, but they obviously don't make it. The people are alerted to what happened. The elves track down this little band of dwarves, kill most of them, take back the Silmaril and Oglamir mix, and 2 of the dwarves get away. They make it all the way back to Belagast. I'm sorry, to Nargrad. And they tell the other dwarves what happened, and they lie. They bend the truth, and they say that after they made it, King Thingol had some of them executed, and it was a big deal, which wasn't obviously true.
Yeah,
They lied. And it obviously infuriated the other dwarves to the point where the dwarves decided to go to war.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to go to war with the Elven Kingdom of Doriath.
Yeah, which is we talked about in episode 1 or 2. We talked about why dwarves and elves don't get along. And
Episode 1.
This is it right here.
This is the origins of the disparity between the dwarves and the elves. It's more than a misunderstanding. At this point, an entire army of an entire army of like high dwarves, because they're at a pretty big peak in their days.
Oh yeah,
comes and absolutely sacks Menegroth, the capital of the kingdom of Doriath.
What we didn't mention is it was easier to do that because when Melian heard about Thingol being dead, she just fucking leaves and she goes to Valinor.
Yeah.
She's done. She's done with Middle Earth. She leaves. Her
Melian,
love is killed.
Melian being not just an elf, but in fact a Maiar, who was married to Thingol, the king elf. After he's dead, she just goes into mourning. The girdle of Melian falls. Anyone can enter Doriath, and she leaves back to Valinor to I guess, grieve in the
Lorien,
gardens of Lorien, which is what Mandos offered Lúthien earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so guard is down. They get destroyed, and they completely sack Menegroth. Who do they kill at the gates of the... They kill someone right at the gates of the...
is it Mablung?
I think they kill Mablung.
I think it's Mablung.
They kill Mablung right at the gates of the treasury, and then they raid the treasury, and they leave.
And yeah, they steal everything.
Everything, including the Silmaril.
They steal that shit
necklace.
back.
They steal the
obviously.
Noglamir. And so the whatever elves are left send word to Beren and Lúthien
In Assyrian.
in Osirin. They're still doing their happily ever after shit on their little happy island. And Beren's like, no, this is obviously not okay. I mean, they killed the king, and they sacked everything, and they fucking stole the Silmaril that he lost his hand and died for.
This aggression will not stand, man.
So Beren gets together with some of the green elves of that land, and they travel up to waylay the dwarven army. And as the dwarven army is, they've thought they've got a great victory, they've got all this treasure, and they're heading back to their dwarven stronghold. They get ambushed by Beren and his green elves as they're crossing a river.
Yeah, Beren shows up with a bunch of green elves. And green elves don't like dwarves very much either, so they're cool with killing them.
And ultimately, it's a pretty bloody battle, but in the end, the dwarves lose, and Beren actually single-handedly, once again with one hand,
and his non-dominant hand again,
slays the dwarven king and takes back the Nauglamir. And at that point, they kill most all the dwarves, and the dwarves can't continue to carry their treasure across the river because they're getting ambushed. So they book it, and all the treasure that they stole from Menegroth falls into the river and sinks to the bottom, except for the Silmaril.
Except for the Nauglamir.
He gets the Nauglamir. Beren does. But after that, the river is renamed. It was the River Askar, and then it becomes renamed Lothlorien, which is the Golden Bed. And at that point, they're not really sure what to do with the Silmaril. So Beren and Lúthien keep the Nauglamir.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. And they take it back to Assyrian with them, and Lúthien wears it as a jewel, and she sings and dances with it on, and everybody says it's like the greatest thing that ever happened.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the most beautiful sight outside of Valinor, and for a little while in that part of the land that there was actually some kind of happiness and peace resemblant of Valinor.
Yeah, should we read this? Should I read it?
Oh yeah, go for it. There's a little excerpt.
So a little excerpt here. It is sung that Lúthien, wearing the necklace, and that the immortal jewel was the visions of the greatest beauty and glory that has ever been seen outside of Valinor. And for a little while that land became like a vision of the land of the Valar, and no place has been since so fair, so fruitful, and so filled with light.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, things are going pretty well. For Beren and Lúthien anyway. Menegroth and the kingdom of Doriath, the capital of Menegroth, has been completely sacked, and they're not doing so well. So
And they got no leader.
they have no leader. Now, Lúthien was the daughter of the king, and they have now had a son, Dior.
So Dior is now
The rightful heir.
to the kingdom of Doriath.
Yeah. And so he sees it as his duty.
Yeah.
And when he's old enough, Dior, their son, leaves and goes to Menegroth, and he's happily welcomed as the natural heir, and he actually rebuilds the kingdom of Doriath back to prosperity.
Yeah. For a while they have peace.
And things get better thanks to Dior. And one night, late in autumn, there is a messenger of the Green Elves of Osiriand that comes late one night demanding admittance to King Dior. He has a message for him. And this messenger, late at night, brings Dior a box. It's like a strong box, like a lock box. And what does Dior find in that lockbox?
But in that coffer lay the necklace of the dwarves, wherein was set the Silmaril. And Dior, looking upon it, knew it for a sign that Beren, Erkamion, and Lúthien Tinuviel had died indeed, and gone where go the race of men to a fate beyond the world.
There you have it. By that symbol, he knew that Beren and Lúthien were finally dead.
For real this time.
For real. And that's
it, guys.
That is officially the end of Beren and Lúthien.
Yeah, part 2 of part 2. Yeah.
After a few technical difficulties and a late release, we hope you guys enjoyed that.
Yeah, and so we have this episode coming in a little bit late. Next week we're going to do the episode that we've been talking about for a while with our friends over at Gamer Radio. We did a Tolkien crossover episode, which is Tolkien video games, excuse me. So we're going to be talking about Tolkien video games with our buddies from Gamer Radio next week. And then the week after that, we're going to be getting into my favorite story in all of Tolkien, guys, because it's so sad. It's just unfathomably sad. It's the saddest story I think I know, and it's really something, and it's got one of my favorite characters, and I'm super excited. I'm balls deep. Like I told Joel, I'm balls deep in this story. Like I'm rereading the Silmarillion. I listened to the Children of Huor an audiobook, and it's going to be great. I can't wait for that episode.
So like we said at the beginning of part 1, we're super excited to bring you guys this series of episodes because it's about the 3 chief tales of the Elder Days from Tolkien's First Age. First of which was Beren and Lúthien, which we just finished. That was Tolkien's ultimate love story. Love defeats defiance against family, against enemies. Love defeats death. It's beautiful. The next story, the second of the three, is the story of the Children of Húrin. Specifically, we're going to call it a character profile on Turin.
Turambar, which means Master of Doom, which is Turambar is one of my favorite names.
And it is, by all means, Tolkien's great tragedy.
It's a tragedy.
And it is absolutely tragic. And it is very well made. It's super beautiful in an obviously tragic sense, but it's one of our favorites.
So yeah, that's coming up. And yeah, we're super excited. So that'll be part 2 of 3 for this excuse me. So Turin will be a 2-parter
as well.
But that will be so Turin would be
the
part
second
2 of 3. So this is super confusing.
Yeah,
it's the second of 3 tales is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't think we should call it a part.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So of the
it's
3
the second
chief
of
tales,
three chief tales.
Right, of the 3 chief tales of the first stage, it is the second and most tragic. And it's a big one too. It's a big deal. There's a lot of major stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope you'll tune in for that. And once again, guys, thanks for sticking with us through this.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys. We're getting a lot of support. Definitely a lot more than I thought we'd be getting at this point. People seem to like it. So hit us up if there's anything. If you hate us, if you love us, give us
some feedback. Yeah, hit us up on Facebook. Send us some hate mail or some love mail.
Yeah, either way, we're fine with it. We can take it. So thanks so much, guys. We love you for listening. And we'd also like to throw out a quick thanks to our producer and editor, Cody Freitag. He's just great. And
yeah, he's the glue holding this stuff together, guys.
Yeah, and thank him basically for this, because if not, if you enjoy at all listening to us, thank Cody, because otherwise it would just be me and Joel sitting on a couch somewhere smoking.
Right, we
talking to each other.
We probably wouldn't even be doing this. So if you really enjoy this, check out some of his other stuff that he's put out. There's plenty of it out there. But as always, guys, thanks for tuning in, and keep on Tolkien.